Milk rubbed the back of her head where her beautiful hair had been buzz cut for surgery. A high-tech bandage sat over the healing scar as it itched. She stared into an omnislate listing BPI, blood pressure, blood acidity, oxygenation, brain activity, the average white blood cell count passing through the conduits, all compared to a standard female, Irish, human woman, and listed as good to fly. Fourth slapped her hand away from the healing scab. Don't pick at it. Picking at scabs and scratching itches damages the implant's connections to your body. She sighs. I swear, we teach every child the same lesson and it never sticks. Remind me why we had to get a chip put in our heads? Cookie asked, leaning up from his hospital bed. I didn't notice anyone else with it. Because new regulations and experimental tests. We're just the lucky batch that got chipped before it rolls out to everyone else. Apparently, they want all pilots and soldiers able to be monitored by their medics at all times, but we're the batch that got chipped. Venture's Fourth replies. Why didn't you go under the knife then? Slivers asked. You're part of our class just as the rest of us. Unlike everyone else, she had to have some of her scales removed and replaced, so there was a splotch in the back of her neck where the grey of her scales didn't quite match the off-white of the medical replacements. The gear child, who got their first implants when they were mere babies, gave the Serpentine lady a deadpan glare. Because the fine-tuned, handcrafted, muscly woven implants used to regulate and monitor my cybernetics are vastly superior to anything built by the noble holding whatever tech contract Patrol got their hands on. Slivers slivered under the heated blanket, tongue flicking around in embarrassment. If you're awake enough to complain, you're awake enough to report, Drill Matron Senwin said in her voice. Unlike most instructors, the short Shilvanti never raised her voice. She spoke in the clean, simple, steady cadence of someone with absolute confidence that what they say will be obeyed. Report. It was Venture Force's job as the Bay lead to report when demanded. The others were to remain silent and cease whatever they were doing, and wait for further orders. Ma'am, Forth began, all cadets have bonded cleanly with their biometric chips. All connections green. All chips reporting data to the correct systems. All is well. She gave a salute and fell into rest. Senwin grabbed an omnislate from the wall and looked through it, nodding as each of the Force chips reported the clean information. She looked around the room, at the cadets sitting in their beds or standing at ease. In 30 minutes, I want to see you in the simulator rooms, she finally decides. Full kit. Simulator pods were a key aspect of training a patrol cadet into a proper interceptor pilot. Using a combination of gravity generators, a sealed pod able to turn 360 degrees, and a one-to-one replica of the interior of a standard patrol interceptor, these machines could push someone to their limits and let them fail as many times as it takes without breaking the expensive hardware or losing cadets because they crashed into a mountain or their instructor. Milk and Cookie had spent tens of hours inside these mock cockpits, hooked up to gravity generators to work through error situations and to familiarize themselves with the controls before they were even allowed to touch a full metal interceptor. And even then, they weren't allowed to fly it. This would be their first combat dogfight against other cadets, or so they were told. The simulation was simple. Venture's Fourth and Slivers would be working as their AWACs in a simulated support ship, while Milk and Cookie would lead a trio of AI-piloted interceptors against a flight of cadets pretending to be pirates and enemy mercenaries. 4 Shilvanti Patrol interceptors versus a dozen odd consortium chasers and 3 drone ships? Seems like stacked odds, isn't it? As Milk sat behind her WSO screen, laying dead in the water, engines off and sensors set to passive, working with the AI to get solid locks on each enemy cadet, all she could think was the numbers. They've got us outnumbered 16-4, she reported with a grin. The poor bastards, Cookie replied, echoing the knife-like smile as he saw, one by one, missile locks appear for each of the enemy ships. Consortium Chaser's ships are the standard enemy in most Shilvanti interceptor training. They're basically engines with a metric fuckton of guns and no missiles, making them a very easy training tool for cadets who need to learn their dogfighting basics. For the most part, they're rarely used because it's just cheaper to send a half-dozen drone ships at the enemy than a single chaser ship, but what actually is doesn't tend to fit into training scenarios. The important part about it is, because of how they're designed, and because of some quirks with the consortium pattern gravity drive, Chaser ships have a massive turn radius compared to the Interceptor's ability to turn on a dime, which made them good ships to train against. Before the mission, the cadets working with the two ex-USN aviators got to choose their equipment, and they made a unique choice. Multi-launch micromissiles. These systems were more or less only used as an alpha strike weapon, or to clear meteors. Each of the half-foot-long missiles would be fired out of an electronic catapult, and use its rudimentary targeting and rocketry system to find their target and detonate with a proximity fuse. A single missile would do nothing, but when a single weapon mount had 9 tubes, and each tube had 6 warheads, there were quite a bit of missiles being fired in a single volley. The combined wing carried 12 of the systems. This is AWACS to Crosstalk. AWACS to Crosstalk, Ventures 4th called out. They have entered optimal range and dispersion. I suggest advancing. We will be heading back to provide radar and ECM assistance. Confirm AWACS. This is Crosstalk Wing, commencing intercept. Let's get these dogs off our lot, Milk reported, flicking all systems on and feeling the low hum of gravity engines fill the cockpit and shake her to her bones. The low blare of a warning horn as Cookie pushed the interceptor forward, and the radar locks became solid. Weapons on your mark, Cookie. Cookie clicked his mic. He was always quiet when piloting, preferring to let his flying speak for itself. But as she watched, he brought the interceptor up and clear of the asteroid they were hiding in the sensor shadow of, and with the AI pilots in perfect formation, fired off the first volley of the micromissiles. Chaser ships are just that. Chasers. They get behind enemy interceptors, shuttles and drone carriers, and force them to break off maneuvers and plans to avoid being destroyed by the massive laser arrays on the front of them. When given the chance to seize the initiative and control the momentum of a fight, these planes were hard to beat. Which is why the cadets of Crosstalk Wing, a name picked with much giggling on Milk's part, had decided to start the fight by forcing the enemy to dodge a massed array of small proximity detection missiles. While normally staying close to your support ship and its protected point defense field would be enough to stay safe from the average missile attack, the sheer amount of munitions being thrown at the enemy forced them to scatter and hope for the best, which was perfect for the interceptors, who thrived on broken apart enemy formations. And so Cookie dived in, slamming the throttle for the interceptor firmly into max speed as he lined up his first target, a drone carrier that had yet to disgorge its deadly cargo. An interceptor is technically limited in acceleration only by how many Gs the pilot can take, same with its turn radius and deceleration, and the human pair could take quite a few Gs. The simulation pod had a safety cutoff in order to not kill cadets who flubbed their limits. The cutoff was rated at 9 Gs, the point after the average Shorvanti would have passed out from G-Log. Gears and Rikiri have the safety cap set higher, but as Grey tinged the edges of Cookie's vision from 12 Gs pushing against him, the smile that split his face wasn't just from his flesh being pushed back. A primal feeling of satisfaction flowed through him, melded with adrenaline, as he felt his very bones vibrate an ancient song as the interceptor dove from safety onto his hapless prey, weapons primed and ready. He tapped the trigger on his stick, sending a short burst of plasma fire into the drone ship to range the distance before holding it down for a good 3 seconds, easily clearing 3,000 meters in the time, peripheral vision fading as he wrenched the ship around, forcing more G-strain onto his body as the drone ship burst into flaming debris from the concentrated force. He laughed. He was flying again. Mind reminding me how the humans haven't passed out yet? Selwyn asked the base's chief doctor. She was overseeing the chip tests and, more specifically, the human recruits for any allergic reactions or adverse effects of space travel. And don't tell me why some people can take more Gs. I know the science. What makes humans different? The doctor pauses for a second, looking over the data being fed from biochips compared to the stressors picked up by the training suits they wore. Those suits were more a mass of sensors than actual life support, so they were perfect for calculating the strain on her body. Well, she began, thinking a bit. She tapped her task with a pen as an almost nervous tick. My best theory is that they're short. There was a pause in the control center. They're short. I mean, yes. One of the main causes of G-Log is a decrease in blood circulation, causing a lack of oxygen to vital systems, the doctor explained, And, as we've seen proven before, pilots who have replaced their limbs with cybernetics, either out of choice or necessity, do show a higher G-force tolerance. Them being quite a bit shorter than everyone else would aid them in circulating blood more efficiently. Alright. Still, that pilot has some tips for the assault. After his backseat to send the missiles out, he didn't hesitate to jump into the fight and exploit the break. Good instincts, the drill instructor mused. The doctor said, disinterested. Doctor? Oh, no, I was just... I've never seen this so-called adrenaline in action before, and it's quite interesting. Semwin groaned as the doctor began to babble about this all-natural combat sim humans made like she had done for months when she was told a pair of humans would be joining their training class. She went back to watching the cadets to see if they were doing anything interesting. The Alpha Strike worked, damaging the drone ships and breaking some of the chasers, but even cadets knew how to turn and fight. Milk swore as one of their AI allies died when an opponent lured it into the firing line of another chaser's ship. The battery of lasers shredding the simulated interceptor was turning to scrap in the void. Friendly down, 3v9, she reported to Cookie. Plan? Cookie was quiet, dodging for a pair of chaser ships, forcing him to break on pursuit or crash. Win conditions? He asked curtly, weaving through simulated debris and laser fire, returning what he could with his gun. Total losses, or killing the ship. Still got our ASM? Can't get rid of it. That's the plan? Got a better one? Finding you an opening. Mill began scanning the enemy's ship. It was the standard cargo-carrying vessel, modified to carry fighter craft most pirates used. Slivers. A voice came over the comms. I might be able to get you an opening. I'm not the best at gunnery, but... There was a pause and some muttering. Where was that override? Found it. I've always wanted to say this. Firing main array. Cookie's eyes widened before he rolled off. Instinct more than the blaring warnings in the cockpit telling him to get out of the way, as the reptilian cadet fired off a single beam of pure energy clean into the side of the up-armored and up-gunned cargo frigate. One of the Allied interceptors and a free chaser craft didn't have the ex-USN pilot's instincts and were caught in the blast, turned into atomic dust in the simulated void. Got you opening, Slivers cheerfully replied. Someone has got to teach her the concept of clear backblast, Milk groused, while pulling up the targeting systems for the anti-shipping missile. Go for the run. I'll release when we get a solid lock. Cookie didn't bother responding, instead going into a steep dive. If that phrase had any meaning in the 3D battle space that is space. The engines gave off a hum as he tore through another chaser ship, sending it to pieces with his laser weapon as he swung low over the hull of the cargo ship, right under the point defense envelope, as Milk made ready the massive missile to be fired right at the weak point, formed by the support ship's main gun. Almost, Milk muttered, watching as the targeting square slowly turned green, as her finger twitched over the launch trigger. Almost, she whispered, as a stray laser nearly put a hole through their wing. A mechanical blare in her ear almost made her jump, but on instinct, she pulled the trigger, sending the 3-meter, chemically fired plasma-tipped weapon straight into the weakened armor of the cargo frigate. An explosion flared over their screen as the simulation slowly came to an end with the phrase, Patrol Victory, flaring on the sealed helmets the pair wore. The gravity generators that had been pushing against the two for the whole time slowly began to reduce gravity back down to 1G as the pair shook. Combat flight. They flew a combat mission for the first time in nearly 7 years. Grins stretched across their faces as the simulator pod opened and they climbed out to the severe look from their drill matron. They quickly took off their helmets and came to a salute as Semwin looked the pair over. Acceptable. You were incredibly sloppy, wasted various openings, attempted to kill the frigate without dealing with the rest of its interceptors, and got multiple of your allies killed. Acceptable for your first time. Debrief in 10. Milk threw up on the drill matron's boots.